Hey, all right, we're live. This is Chris Brown here for the Tigers Minor League Report. We are pleased to be joined by Gania, the radio, I don't know, TV, whatever, MILB announcer for the Erie SeaWolves. Greg, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Not bad, not bad. Rod should be along here any second now. We're just, trying to cover the minor leagues as best we can.
Raj invites me on and then he stands me up. What's going on here?
I don't know. Yeah, he had to run out to the store, I think. So, but
Hey,
yeah,
if this was Dan Dickerson coming on right now, he wouldn't be running to get a gallon of skim milk.
it's possible. We talked when we talked to Dan. He was on his evening constitutional, so he was able to talk to us while he was walking around. But he wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't popping in to shoot the breeze about the minor leagues. But no, it's great to be able to have somebody who's there watching the games and calling the games and right there at the source. So yeah, typically we kind of run through the whole system, but I guess since we have the pleasure of having you here, we should probably just start with Erie and talk about how things are going in general so far this season.
It's been a pretty good start for the team. We lost on Sunday against Binghamton and just couldn't get the bats going. And the first three games of that series, they were tearing the cover off the ball. Everything was falling in, and it seems like there are. It's been a streaky offense all year for us, and once it starts clicking, it's pretty fun to watch. But then they go into these spells where they just can't put the bat on the ball, and that's been tough for them at times. And there have been a couple games where the offense has bailed out the pitching, but more vice versa, where the pitching has been just phenomenal and the offense is just enough to win games. But in the Binghamton series, we put up 22 runs in the first three games of that series, and then something like 5 runs in the last three. The one night we were shut out 2-0, only had one hit. And so it's very much been that type of season so far. And again, it's so early. But the fact is, game out of first place 3 weeks into the season, I think, anybody would take that. Above 500 record in the minor leagues after the month of April is a pretty good start for any club. And so it's been fun to watch at times. It's been tough to watch at times when you're just on the cusp of waiting for something really good to happen. But it's been fun so far.
There's Raj. How are you, Raj?
Hey, Greg. Hey, guys. So sorry about that being late there, but
it's all good. I was just asking Greg about basically the basic rundown. How's it going for Erie so far? From watching afar, there have been some kind of remarkable pitching performances. We've seen, wasn't a doubleheader that Garrett Hill and Reece Olson combined for 19 strikeouts or something like that? Wow.
Yeah, it was. And then this past week, it was Wolf and Olson that got the doubleheader, and they both looked great as well. But yeah, I mean, those top three in the rotation have been really good for us. Reece Olson last year struggled at times with his command. I think he was a little unsure of himself when he got to Double-A. And not to say he wasn't ready to be here, because he clearly has the stuff to be here. But he was getting his feet wet with those last few starts of 2021, and he has been electric all season long. Garrett Hill, he had a little bit of a tough go of it in his start against Binghamton. He was cruising early and then ran into trouble in the fifth inning. But those guys have been they've been consistent. Those top three. Wolf has really surprised me. I did not expect to see the start that he's had, and he has been pretty dominant on the mound, throwing from the left side. Really mixes up his speeds well, and goes right after hitters. And that's something that you don't always see when guys come up from A-ball. A lot of times, first couple starts in Double-A after not pitching at this level before, you'll see guys unsure of their stuff. They kind of dance around the strike zone, not really sure what to throw and what counts. But those guys have been phenomenal, and you can't underestimate the work that Dylan Dingler has done behind the plate catching those guys. And I think after today's loss, that they're 10-4 with Dingler behind the plate catching this year. So it's been impressive what he's been able to do, and he's been kind of that calming force with the entire pitching staff. And even when things, he just has that kind of sixth sense when things start to go awry. He knows when to go out to the mound, calm a guy down. So while he hasn't been necessarily tearing the cover off the ball at the plate, he has been contributing in a major way with this pitching staff right now.
One of the things that I know last year was going on was that the SeaWolves had kind of a back and forth with the bullpen, but I like what I've seen so far with Brendan White, and the bullpen seems to have kind of a stability now that it did not have last season.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, again, early in the year, it's tough to define roles. I think White could be that back end of the bullpen guy. He's been mostly the sixth, seventh inning guy right now. The back end has pretty much been Yaya Shentoof and Gerson Moreno. Shentoof, he had a tough go of it today. Got to 2 outs and then walked a couple of guys. But his arm has looked really good this season. But yeah, Brendan White, he's an intriguing guy. Another guy who goes right after hitters, has pretty good stuff, and he commands his pitches very well and doesn't get himself into trouble very often. Not a guy who's going to walk a lot of guys, and I think the transition from him from a starter to a reliever is probably the right move with him.
Yeah, I remember we saw him several times at West Michigan last year, and it was he stood out for his slider mostly, and we would spy the TrackMan or Hawkeye data up there. I guess it was TrackMan last year, now it's Hawkeye, and we're like, oh, that's some pretty high spin stuff. So I don't know if his velocity has ticked up out of the bullpen or if it's still kind of 92, 94. But
that's generally where the fastball has been. But it's been fastball location. He's been able to keep the ball down, and he elevates when he needs to as well. So he's done a nice job of going down and away on right-handed hitters with the slider and then busting them high and tight for strikeouts. He just, when I saw his numbers coming into the season, I really didn't know what to expect. And I think that, the ERA was probably pretty inflated from last season because he started so many games. But in that short burst, when you're coming out of the bullpen, you need a guy to low to mid 90s fastball, pretty good slider, and can get outs. And he's done that so far. He has not really had an outing where you're like, oh, this guy doesn't really belong here. He's looked good in the bullpen. And then again, depending on what happens, down the road here with Shentoof and Moreno, I don't think Gabe Alvarez would hesitate for a moment to put him in the back end role.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect something like that down the road. We didn't even mention, was it Austin Bergner? Did he have a no hitter through 5 the other day?
Yeah, no, that was the best he's looked all season. He's one of those guys, kind of like I mentioned before, where you don't know what you're going to get on a guy coming up from A-ball. And he looked unsure of himself in his first couple of starts. He got roughed up in his second start. I believe that was in Somerset. Didn't look good that day, but then he came out this week in Binghamton and it looked almost like a completely different pitcher. The walks were down, and he a guy that's not going to overpower you. You can't walk guys, and I think he had 3 walks in each of his first 2 starts, and that's what got him into a lot of trouble. And again, it's that mentality that a lot of the young pitchers that come up from A-ball, they just start to nibble, and I think we saw a lot of nibbling out of him at first. And he just kind of let it loose this week in Binghamton, and 5 no-hit innings. I mean, in his pitch count, gosh, I want to say he was only in right around 60 pitches in the game, so he could have gone out there and continued on in the game. But it was just a situation where the doubleheader the day before, starters each went 5 innings. They needed to get the bullpen guys some work. So that's been the one downside, I guess, of the starting pitching being as good as it's been lately for Erie, is the fact that the bullpen arms have not gotten regular work yet. And so I think at times we see some of the arms in the pen look a little rusty, and it's just because Gabe Alvarez, it's a juggling act of getting guys time. And now you're seeing a lot more, you're seeing a lot fewer of the 1 inning outings out of the relievers, because if they can ride him for 2, they're doing it.
And one of the things that, excuse me, Chris and I have talked about this, was how the pitchers seem to have an individual plan. One of the things I noticed last week, Garrett Hill's start, was a lot of up and in, and you talk about that with the relievers and starters. Is that kind of a organizational philosophy, it seems like? Because everything that a lot of the pitchers are going inside more and more. But I was just wondering, is it something passed along with, I know with every pitcher has their own individual plan, but it just seems like there's a pattern there.
There is, it's funny you say that, because I actually said the exact same thing to the Somerset broadcaster when we were there. I said, you watch what our guys do, and more so than any other time in my time in Erie, it has been a case where they are not afraid to pitch up and in on guys, and they're getting strikeouts on the high fastball, and more so than I've ever seen before. And hitters are going after it. And so I think that with the command that these guys have exhibited in their starts, it enables them to go up and in on guys, and they're getting strikeouts that way. But yeah, I think that's definitely been that's been the go-to pitch for a lot of the Erie pitchers this season. And especially if you get an umpire who's calling the high strike, then they really start to take advantage of it. And again, that's where I think, going back to Dylan Dingler, was, he's got a very good awareness of the strike zone. And so when that is being called up in the top of the zone, then they're going to let it loose and go there. And so that's where I think he really plays into the factor of what these guys are able to do. But yeah, no, I mean, you're right. Every pitcher has their own plan and what they work on. I know I talked to Gabe the other day, and Gabe Rivas, the new pitching coordinator, has individual plans for everyone. And really it's been an organizational shift of how they handle pitching this year. Everything from their daily routine is so scripted right now, and they want to keep these guys on the same routine every single day. They're not really individualized. It's very much a cohesive, here's our pitching plan and here's how we're going to follow it. And I think that's leading to success. And in the past, that always wasn't the case with the pitchers. So, they have their throwing program. They've got they have even, specific stretching program just for the player for the pitchers this season. So that's been neat to see, because we haven't seen that in the past. And I think a lot of it has to do with arms getting hurt in the minor leagues for the Tigers the last several years. And so they have just, as we know, they cleaned house on that side of the minor league player development on the pitching side of it. And it's starting from scratch this year. And so far, so good. Pitchers are staying healthy and they're getting outs, and the numbers are looking pretty good.
Yeah, it's kind of we've always joked about it. We've been going down to West Michigan or Toledo for 5-6 years now, and we would always try to get something out of the players, like, hey, what exactly are they working with you on? And almost always it was, hey, they just wanted me to go out there and pitch my game. It's like, well, that's okay. I mean, that's good.
Hey, thanks for the info, guys.
So it's a very good to see that they're doing things. Testing out hip flexibility, all that stretching you're talking about, doing things that like, oh, this guy, he can't stretch enough to be able to pitch like this. So you give him specific stretching exercises, and what do you know? He's throwing 3 miles an hour harder. Like Bo Brisky. You saw Brisky last year at the end of the season, right? He was
absolutely
topping out at 95. He may have touched 96. I don't know, but do it kind of regularly now in the big leagues.
Yeah, Brisky, when he came up last year, again, he was one of those guys where we didn't really know what we were going to get, and he got to Double-A pretty quickly, and then pretty quickly once he got on the mound, it's like, okay, this kid can pitch. And I was having a conversation. He had a brilliant start last year at the end of the year in Harrisburg, and I was talking to the Harrisburg broadcaster this past week, and I said, hey, you remember that kid that pitched against you guys last year? He's like, Brisky, right? I was like, yeah, he's in the big leagues now. He's like, you told me last year when we saw him in Harrisburg that this kid's going to get up there, and sure enough, he did. I mean, you talk about a diamond in the rough. What was he, 27th rounder? Yeah. And came out of nowhere. And that kid's going to be a big league pitcher for a long time if he can stay healthy. He has tremendous feel for his pitches, and he knows when to throw them. And for a young guy, that's an acquired talent, and he's going to be pretty special. I do like the fact that they've gotten him into the fold now, because that's just another option for AJ Hinch. Even if they have to put him back down in Toledo, at least that he's got a couple starts under his belt. And he, who knows? He may never go back down for all we know. But if he does, it's another really viable option that's sitting right waiting in the wings in AAA for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the things too. Speaking of AAA and getting into the depth a little bit, the outfield right now has been getting, in terms of injuries, Reyes is on the IL. And of course, we saw today that Robbie Grossman had a negative X-ray. But as far as the outfield goes in Erie, I know it's a night and day situation. It was last year. But as far as what you've seen so far in Parker Meadows, who got off to a really good start at West Michigan, thought he hit the ball pretty well the other night. What in terms of guys that maybe could potentially see sometime in the next year or two down in Toledo or even in the majors, how's the outfield crop looking so far?
They've all struggled. Meadows, I think the jury's still out on him. He put together some really good at-bats his first couple of days. He's the one thing that I really liked that he did was he's actually, I think he drew 5 walks in the series. Mm-hmm. And you never see that out of a hitter coming up from A-ball to come up to Double-A and face Double-A pitching, that they're going to draw that many walks in a 6-day span. I mean, that's pretty good. So he's been disciplined at the plate. He looked a little jumpy today. Today was probably the worst day that we've seen him at the plate. I know for one time he went down on 3 straight pitches, was fooled on the breaking ball. I think he just threw 3 yackers in there and he chased after all 3 of them. But in the outfield, he's been tremendous. He's tracked balls down. He gets good reads on balls off the bat. Nothing has gotten over his head. And again, very short sample size right now. But I like what I see. Good body frame and really stands in there at the plate and he's not afraid to take his hacks. And you're going to see some swings and misses out of him at this level. But I think the other big difference where it might be beneficial to a guy like him is, when you're an A-ball, yeah, you've got some talented pitchers in the A-ball level, but a lot of those guys don't know how to consistently throw strikes. And I think you get a lot of swings and misses down there where, guys are just chasing because they think it's going to be close to the zone. When you get here, these guys are pretty close to the zone. When they're missing, they're not missing by much. And that even increases more when you get up to Toledo. So, that was one of the question marks about Kreidler last year when he, because his strikeout numbers were pretty high in Erie. And when he got up to Toledo, he just started tearing the cover off the ball. And I remember asking Arnie Baylor about it. And he goes, he's going to hit it there because those guys are around the plate more so than in Double-A. So we saw it with him. And I think we're going to see that out of Parker Meadows this season where, he's been in A-ball for 3 years now. And, down there, it's more – I guess one pitching coach explained it to me once where it's like it's more rock chucking in A-ball and it's more pitching at Double-A. And there's truth to that. You have a bunch of good live arms down there, but they don't know how to harness it. And when you get here, now is when you're seeing pitchers really start to harness. And for Parker, I think he's going to see more pitches here. And it wouldn't surprise me if he hits better here than he did in West Michigan this season. That's for sure. The rest of the outfield, I thought Carrie Carpenter had turned a corner last week against Richmond, had a really good week against the Flying Squirrels. And then this past week in Binghamton, he just didn't have it at the plate. And, I have it written down here because I came prepared for my podcast tonight.
Nicely done, Greg. Nicely done.
Oh yeah, I've always got my binder with me here. He went 2 for 20 in the series against Binghamton. So that was surprising to me. I really thought he had changed things around. Eric Delarosa fouled a ball off his foot second or third game of that series, and they put him on the IL. He's been another guy where he'll show you little flashes, and it's almost a tease where it's like, okay, he's starting to figure it out at the plate. I mean, he was flat out lost when we were in Somerset, where there was one pitch where he swung at it, and it was probably 5 feet in front of the plate. And so Gabe Alvarez sat him down for a few days. And then when he came out last week against Richmond, had a really good week. And then it just sort of regressed, I think, again, this past road trip up in Binghamton. The one that surprised me the most is I expected a little better out of Daniel Cabrera. He looked good at the plate today. He was robbed of a hit twice. But coming into the day was 159 at the plate, no homers and 2 ribbies. So his strikeout numbers have been high too. He's right now at 21 strikeouts to 4 walks. So he's struggled at the plate. And right now with 4 priority outfielders, the Tigers want to see those guys in the lineup every day. You're going to have to earn it at this point. And so it'll be interesting to see how Gabe really shifts the lineup around, because I know they want Cabrera in there every day. I know they want Delarosa when he's healthy. I know they want Meadows, and I know they want Carpenter. So one of those guys is probably going to be DHing, and then maybe throw Dane Myers in there in the outfield a little bit as well. He could play left. He can possibly play right a little bit for Erie. So it's an intriguing outfield on paper, and I just think we just don't know what it's going to be. Again, Meadows, too short of a sample size, and then they've been working hard with the other 3, and it's again, just when you think that it's really starting to click, then it just kind of went away. And so I can't really put my finger on why the outfield has struggled at the plate so much. In the field, they've been great. They're none of them have been a defensive liability. They've all looked good in the outfield. Cabrera, I think he's better on balls back than going in on balls. He seems to, at times, if the ball's going to be over his head, you have no problem with him catching that ball every time. When it's a ball that's in front of him, sometimes he'll pull up a little early. So I think that's something that they're going to have to work on with him. But yeah, nobody out there has been an issue defensively, but it's been at the plate where they've all 3 have struggled.
And we were discussing this a little bit before the show, but there's just a lot of sort of all or nothing hitters in Erie right now. And then you talked about Delarosa, he was off to a brutal start, and then he came back, and you see what he can do if he can just get on base. He causes nightmares for the other team because he's so fast and so aggressive. And then you got someone like Gage Workman who when he makes contact does a tremendous amount of damage. He just hasn't been making enough contact. And he's another guy who just decided to run wild this year. He had the 1-4 steal game, and he's got 9 or 11 steals now, I think.
Yeah, 11 steals, 1 caught stealing, and the 1 caught stealing was, I mean, he got a little greedy the other night in Binghamton, where he just started walking to third, and the pitcher finally stepped off, and then they picked him off. But as far as him just taking off and the catcher throwing him out, it hasn't happened yet. He's been running wild, and that was one of the things Gabe Alvarez said coming out of spring training when I asked him about kind of his style and his philosophy, and he wants to play aggressive baseball. And when the wheels are turning, it's been really incredible to watch how aggressive they have been. But the problem is like last night and even in today, Erie 4 hits in the game today. None in the first 4 innings of the ball. The first hit was a Quincy Naporti home run in the 5th. It's tough to get aggressive when you don't have guys getting on base. And so, with Workman, he's another guy. They dropped him down to the 5 spot in the lineup today. But again, you look at his numbers from the Richmond series, and you're like, okay, he's figuring things out. And then he gets on the road, and Binghamton's a pretty good hitter's park. And in the series, he went 4 for 24 and 1 RBI. So, he just it's been the consistency factor with just about everybody on the Erie offense right now. And you're encouraged because you do see those 2-3 game stretches where these guys, it starts to click, and the offense has been contagious. But then, you have the spell this week of 18 innings without a run, and you're like, what is going on here? And, I think it's twofold from the Binghamton series. The first 3 games, the Binghamton pitching staff was not always, but generally speaking, first pitch fastball on most of these hitters. And then they completely flipped their philosophy for the last 3 games of the series, and they were pitching from behind. And our hitters did not adjust to that very well. There was a lot of changeups and breaking balls early in counts. And I think that caught our guys off guard, especially the night where we had 1 hit. And they really never bounced back from that. But it was a complete reversal on the Binghamton side of how they pitched the Erie hitters. That they couldn't make adjustments at in the last 3 games of the series. But yeah, Gage is another guy who, again, batting average sitting right now at 215. But yeah, I can't remember which one you mentioned it, but when he hits the ball, man, does it fly. I mean, he can absolutely crush the baseball. And it's been the problem for him in his entire career is not making enough contact. And he's looked better from the left side of the plate than the right. I think that's clearly his strongest side of the plate, but he has shown improvement on the right side of the plate. It's not just giving up an at bat. So I do want to make mention of that, because I know they worked very hard with him and tweaked his swing a little bit at the end of last season. And so, and able to be a switch hitter, you got to be able to hit from both sides of the plate. And so he's shown that at times. But in the field, my God, has he been impressive. He is just getting to everything, and he's making every spectacular play. He's been, I think, as far as exciting players in the field, bar none, it's been Gage Workman. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect out of a 6'4" left side of the infield kind of guy, and he can move and he can pick it, and balls get on him in a hurry when he's in at third base, and he makes every play. And so that's a very encouraging sign. So when that bat finally comes around and he can hit with consistency, watch out.
And talk about the bats. I know this week you guys are taking Altuno, who has the best batting average in the league, and they have a couple of guys who are on the 40-man roster for the Pirates. Unfortunately, their pitching staff's a different story, but either way,
I like the sound of that. That means I'll get to call a lot of home runs this week.
Yeah, they have the league ERA of 4.27 going into this week. But as far as you're talking about the hitting with Erie, for example, we've noticed in MLB right now the hitting, the averages are down and everything. Is that, and also, with the exception of Somerset, who they hit every home run, it just seems like the Yankees' philosophy. But I digress. Is that the same thing with the Eastern League? Is it just averages down across? Or just guys just trying to catch up a little bit right now?
It's tough to say. I think the weather absolutely played a factor. One of the things, and it didn't dawn upon me until someone brought this up the other day, but most of these guys in the minor leagues haven't played in April since 2019. You figure 2020, there was no season. 2021, we didn't start until May. Spring training was in April. So this is uncharted waters for a lot of these guys, especially if you were a draft pick in 2019. You've never played in April baseball, especially in this part of the country. So I think that has something to do with it. Offenses throughout have had a slow start in the league. But I do think that is a big factor, where a lot of these guys have never played either in cold weather or B, cold weather in April. And, I mean, crying out loud, we had snow in game 2 of the doubleheader tonight. Game time temperature was 32 degrees. And of course, that's the game we scored the most runs in that series, put up 10 runs. It's a freaking snowstorm. But yeah, I think the weather does have a lot to do with it. And, I've always said that early on in the Eastern League, it's always been pitching dominated. We're not seeing the home run balls that we've seen in the past. I think you could, put Altoona aside from that one in Somerset, because that's all they do is hit home runs in their bandbox of a ballpark. Oh, guys, that ballpark's a joke. It's an 8-foot wall all the way around. I think it's like 317 down both lines with an 8-foot wall. What? And so when you see Somerset's home run numbers at the end of the season, you're like, boy, they seem like they hit a lot of. Yeah, it's that ballpark plays a lot into that. But yeah, no, I think the weather's a factor. The April part is a factor, and the arms in this league are pretty darn good. I mean, you just look at Erie right now with 3 horses in the rotation that have been consistent. 5 1/3, 6 innings. You're getting that throughout the league right now, and so it's been pitching dominated early. It'll be interesting to see as the weather heats up how that changes.
Well, hopefully. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just saying, we had our buddy Trevor Huth was on, and he was pointing out when I was talking about all the strikeouts, he was pointing out who Erie was facing, and the Akron staff and then the Somerset staff. Like, these are like Ken Waldachuk and Daniel Lespido, and these are guys who can really shove. So it's not, you have to factor that into it too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and Binghamton, they came in today at 5-14. And, I had asked their broadcaster going into the series, I'm looking at your numbers and I don't see a 5-14 team here. So what's going on? And for them, they had some pretty good arms, especially out of their bullpen. But I think the Mets overall are in flux. I mean, I guess they are every year. But they've had a situation where they've just been shifting guys back and forth between rotation and bullpen, and they just haven't been able to figure out what the roles are in Binghamton. So I think that has led to some of their early season downfalls with a pretty poor record out of the gate. But the back end of their bullpen, they have 3 or 4 guys that are bringing it. I mean, kid today was 97 and 99. The kid through yesterday was in the high 90s as well. So it's even on teams that are sitting in the basement in the league. There are still some power arms in this league, more so than I think I've ever seen with the power arms. It's been incredible to watch. But yeah, I mean, you're right. When you're facing guys like Waldachuk and Espino, I mean, my goodness, they're going to get their strikeouts all the time.
And it was funny. I was watching the other day. I'm like, Alec Casena. That name seems familiar to me. And I looked. I'm like, wait, yeah, the Tigers drafted him like in 2015, and then he just disappeared. I don't know what happened to him, and suddenly he's in.
Yeah. He never made it out of the GCL with Detroit.
No, yeah. I was like, I totally forgot about this dude, and yeah, here he's pitching in Double-A at he's like 26 now or whatever.
Yeah, it's I talked about this on the air. What was it, yesterday when he pitched? My days are all running together now. It's every day runs together when you're in the minor leagues. But I brought up on the air how oftentimes if that kid ends up making it to the big leagues, which who knows? In this day and age, guys you never think are going to make it are going to make it, and vice versa. But when he gets up to the big leagues, if he ends up getting there, then all the pundits are going to come out and say how the Tigers missed on this kid and how they had him and they lost him. And I think from a talent evaluation side of things, it's so tough. You get some of these, and now that the draft is smaller than it was in the past, but I mean, prior to that, when you had 40 rounds of a draft, not everybody's going to pan out for every organization. And I can't tell you now how many times you go through and you see guys that have never made out of the GCL with other organizations, and then all of a sudden you see them in Double-A. Sometimes guys are late bloomers, and there's nothing wrong with that. If guys who stick with it long enough, and sometimes you're going to hit on a guy like that, and sometimes you're going to miss on guys like that. It's part of the game. And I think he was probably a little jazzed up because he was facing his former organization. But again, a guy that if you could throw strikes and not give up a million runs, then you're going to have a job.
Well, I mean, we've seen a handful of guys like that, the people that I never would have projected to make the majors. In in the last year, we've seen Spencer Watkins. We saw Locke St. John a couple of years ago reach the majors. And then just this year, we've seen Jose Azocar and very recently Jason Krazan, which it's like awesome to see. And I don't feel like Tigers miss on these guys. It's just like good on those guys for sticking with it.
You know, with Watkins, I was shocked that they didn't offer him a minor league free agent contract after his contract expired, because he was that rubber arm in the minor leagues where if you needed him to go start in the GCL, he would fly to Florida, pitch there, and then 5 days later go and give you 5 innings in Toledo. There was just something special with him, and good guy, and he did everything and will continue to do everything an organization asks of him. And so he's the type of organizational guy that you love to have. And, it's very similar with a guy like AJ Ladwig. He doesn't have the numbers that Watkins did in the minor leagues, but another guy who, if you send him to West Michigan, he wouldn't be happy, but he'd go down there, make a couple starts. And then, the next week he'll be up in Toledo and he'll make a couple starts there. Just good organizational guys to have. And, sometimes those guys put on a good string of starts, 5-6 starts where you're looking really good. You might find yourself in the big leagues after an injury or two. Azokar was, I think, a tough one for the Tigers to lose. And again, you look back on it, and there's so many outfielders that they have right now that are coming up that they're high on. But Azokar was one I thought that's probably one they should have held on to. I thought that in 2019 when he was here. He's a special player, and he's not flashy, but he just gets the job done. And he could be a fourth outfielder in the big leagues. There wasn't a doubt in my mind now, and there wasn't any doubt then. I think he's a guy that can be a fourth outfielder in the major leagues. I don't think he's an everyday player, but that guy might spend a few years in the big leagues. There's no doubt.
So, as far as this week concerned, is there any promotions you guys want to plug this week, Greg, for anybody?
Oh my goodness, you're bringing out I brought baseball stuff here, and you're asking about promotions.
Well, I want to throw that back in there before we get into baseball, because I was trying to.
No, you're good. So yeah, big week. So Cinco de Mayo obviously is Thursday, and so I've been self-proclaiming on the air that it's Erie's biggest Cinco de Mayo party. I don't know if it is, but we're calling it that. But that's and it happens to fall on $2 Thursday, so pretty exciting. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, $2 beers on Cinco de Mayo. That should be a fun one. And then Friday we're giving away stainless steel tumblers. They're like just basically Yeti replicas. They're pretty cool. And then Saturday fleece blanket giveaway. So it's always cold in Erie in May, so let's give away a blanket. But the big promos are going to be coming up starting really end of May and then into June. We have the Matt Manning bobblehead coming up. And then Torque Tuesdays start in June, where it's a different Spencer Torkelson. We're going to ride that Torkelson train as hard as we can. I mean, we'd be foolish not to with his popularity right now. But I actually spent I sent him a text with some of the giveaway stuff the one day, and I'm like, hey, you're going to get some pretty cool stuff this year, man, because we always send a box to all the players. So I'm very much looking forward to when we actually send Spencer the Torque tank tops, and because darn well that there's going to be guys in that Tigers clubhouse. They're going to be squeezing themselves into a yellow Spencer Torkelson Erie tank top.
Well, yeah, with the Zubas.
Yeah, you look like Borat.
Yes. No, I think the question of the hour, though, is when are you guys coming to Erie?
Yes. Well, Chris. I will probably end up coming there. Well, I don't know you, Chris. I mean, I'm always down to go, man.
No, I am too. I just depends on. We got to look to see where. I don't think we're going to do the drive there and drive home.
Never again.
Yeah,
never again.
That's right there, guys.
But so yeah, it's just a matter of finding a weekend that looks good, and so it depends on sometimes who the players that we want to see, but I'd like to get out there and see some of the talent in the area for sure.
Yeah, there's the one of the talents really too, because I forgot to mention this. He's been coming up on every pod we've done so far this year, and that's Dane Myers. And a lot of guys were wondering if he's kind of an or guy or what have you. I know he made that transition from a pitcher. Then he was playing third base quite a bit last year before he got injured. But Dane Myers, some of the home runs he's had some really majestic shots so far this year.
No, I really like Dane. He kind of burst on the scene a little bit last year, and he's a versatile player. He's really athletic. And so this year, Gabe has used him at first base. He's used him at third base, and he's used him in the outfield. He's made one error amongst those three positions, and he's been an everyday player. So he's made some really good plays. And I want to say the error that he made, it was, gosh, I think it was in the Binghamton series, he made the error. And it was one of those where you could chalk this up to cold weather because it was just nasty out and he made an error. But yeah, he's been good. And, he's another guy right now that's going to be fighting for playing time. With, like I said, with the outfielders that are on this club and the Tigers want to see those guys, especially Meadows, in the lineup every day. It really limits opportunities for other guys, but Dane Myers has made the most of his opportunities all season long. I mean, he's been a right around 300 hitter all year, has shown some pops, got 4 home runs. And you're right. The home runs he's hit have been pretty big home runs. The thing I like about what he has done is the last couple of home runs have been to the opposite field for him. So he's been able to muscle them out the other way. And that's, kind of shifting gears real quickly here. One of the things that John Murrian has been working with these guys a lot is hitting the ball the other way. And we've seen a lot of that out of Dylan Dingler. Carpenter was starting to show signs of that when we were at home last week. It's just trying to get these guys to not be the dead pool hitters, because we've seen that in the past where they've made the early season effort to get guys to use all fields, and then they revert back into just becoming pool hitters. Obviously, without a shift anymore in the minor leagues, you can be successful as a pool hitter, but they are really harping on these guys going the opposite way. And it's good to see a guy like Dane be able to do that because he's a strong kid and being able to muscle balls out the other way. So yeah, Dane's an intriguing guy. He's so athletic. And, our beat writer always jokes around, Tom Reisenweber, about, if we need a position player to pitch, Dane's the guy. But I don't think that he's going to be that sacrificial lamb, because he's a valuable asset for the team right now. And, he can DH, he can play first, he can play third, he can play a little bit in the outfield, and he's looked good. And I'm glad you brought him up, because he's an exciting player to watch, and he gives you good at bats. And that's important. And, he's had some good battles at the plate. He's had a couple 3-hit games already this season. At times he gets a little streaky at the plate, but I guess who doesn't when you're in the minor leagues? But yeah, he's been good, and I'm look forward to seeing how the season progresses with Dane. And he's the type of guy that if he continues to hit, he's going to force his way into the lineup every day. And I would not be the least bit surprised if he ended up in Toledo at some point, if he can continue what he's doing.
Yeah, we talked about
shifting real quickly again about the multiple positions thing. That's key. That is so key. If you can show value to an organization by being able to be versatile in the field and being a solid fielder at multiple positions, then that gives your organization a lot of options. I think back to a guy like Dean Green several years ago. He was a one-trick pony. He could play a little bit of first base, but mostly he's going to be a DH. And unfortunately, as much as he hit the ball, he just didn't have a job because he was so limited in what he could do in the field. When you are a minor league player, and again, you might be auditioning for another organization, but having that versatility of being able to play multiple positions is so key. And, you see guys that come out of college and it's, well, I'm a first baseman. It's like, well, no, pal, you're not. You're going to play wherever the organization needs you to play. I experienced that when I was in A-ball in short season A many moons ago, that guys were like, well, I don't understand why this organization, I've been playing second base my whole life. And, now they want me to play 3 different positions. Like, dude, that's what's going to get you to the big leagues if you're good. If you can show that kind of value to an organization, then your value versus a guy who has similar offensive numbers that can only play one position, who are they going to keep? It's going to be the guy who has multiple positions under his belt.
Yeah, Mr. 300. We saw last year with Johnny Valenti, who's starting everywhere in Toledo right now too. So, but yeah,
mark my words, he's going to play in the big leagues. I said that to Arnie Bailey last year, and Arnie was like, "Yeah, you might be right. I don't know. It's kind of early." I'm like, Arnie. He reminded me a lot of David Eckstein when he was there last season. Just sprays the ball over the field, a little bit of pop, but can play every position, and he's not a defensive liability. But yeah, Johnny 300 is going to be in the big leagues with somebody. Might not be the Tigers, but he'll be in the big leagues.
Yeah. Well, we've been fans of Andre Lipsius for a while now. As a guy, he's not necessarily going to be playing all over the place, but he's going to give you good defense at third and second, and he could fill in at shortstop. He doesn't really have the foot speed he's certainly not going to be Gage Workman level defender at shortstop, but he's a guy, if he's going to produce on offense a little bit and can move from second to third, or who knows, maybe he'll go to the outfield at some point. But he's a guy, he's just kind of been the weird walk machine this year, which is strangely enjoyable to watch from afar. I don't know if it's that great to watch or call a 9-pitch at bat, but
it really kind of blew my mind when I saw the walks early. I mean, because I think he only had 31 walks or 38 walks a season ago, and he's already got 20 this year. 20 walks to what is it?
I think 15 strikeouts,
13 strikeouts. I mean, I don't know what's changed. I haven't had a chance to really sit down and talk to him about it, and partly because I didn't want to jinx him and get in his head like, oh, why are you walking so much? But no, he's a guy he's been in that cleanup spot just about every game, and he's seeing more pitches, and it's been fun to watch. He's been patient at the plate. Every time you talk to a scout and you hear a coach talk about Lipsius, it's always, well, he doesn't have much range. And again, when you compare him to a guy like Gage Workman, all right, well, that's a different stratosphere of range as opposed to a normal infielder. But I got to be honest with you, he makes the plays. There aren't many plays where you're like, oh, you know what? If he wasn't there, if it was Carpio or Workman or somebody else in that position, they would have gotten to that ball. You don't really see that out of Lipsius. And, for all the knocks he gets on not being a rangy infielder, he has not been a defensive liability whatsoever. Doesn't make errors, makes the routine plays, and he gets the balls in the hole. And, it's again, I don't know where his long-term fit will be as far as a position goes. But if he continues to get on base like he's been doing, then who knows? But yeah, he's I still think for him, he's got to, the walks are nice. There's no doubt about that, but he's just got to put the bat on the ball a lot more consistently. And if you're going to be a 240, 250 hitter, you got to have a lot more power than what he's showing right now. You could stomach 250 if the guy's hitting 30 bombs. But he's just, the walks aren't going to win you many games. He's got to start putting the bat on the ball and getting some more hits. But I was really impressed yesterday. He came in and pinch hit double to the wall after sitting all game. I mean, he no matter what they do, they put him in there and he produces.
Especially because, I mean, one of the things that we've always talked about is a position versatility. But yeah, I mean, I thought that last year he seemed to hit the ball in the gap. But again, maybe it's just because of the cold weather and what have you. So that's what the case is. But by the way, I was just thinking about this earlier. When you were talking about the blankets, I was thinking next time when you go to Holiday Inn, make sure you have some extra blankets. That tweet you had, Greg, I felt so bad for you because it's 35 degrees. You're like, okay, look, seasonally speaking, it should be a little warmer than this. I shouldn't have to deal with it. I already have enough to deal with as it stands, doing all these little jobs. And then I come back to my hotel room to unwind, talk to my wife or whatever I do before I go to bed. And these guys can't give me heat. Oh, man, I'm surprised you. Greg,
I was pretty fired up that night, not going to lie. After sitting now, normally I'm a windows open kind of guy for a broadcast, not when it's 30 degrees. That was the mic sticking out the window. And for there were literally 8 people in the seats at the start of game 1. It was so awful and cold out. And, look, attendance in the minor leagues this time of year is never good unless it's a good day, but it was especially bad that day. And I even said, I saw their GM as I was walking out today. I'm like, dude, there's nothing you could have done those first couple days in this series. You could have given away $1 million and there would have still been 8 people in the seats. Just that miserable out. But yeah, no, I get back to the hotel and I'm like, I left with the heat on and I was like, all right, I'll set it like 73. Get back from the 36-degree game and it was 63 in my room. And I'm like, this ain't good. So I called down to the desk and whoever was working the desk that night actually had the gall to say, well, we turned off the heat. And I'm like, what do you mean you turned off the heat? Well, we have one centralized unit in the hotel and it does either air conditioning or heating. So you have to pick one or the other. I'm like, well, don't you think you should have picked heat at this time of year?
yeah.
So I tweet at a Holiday Inn. They respond right away. I had called the Binghamton GM and I said, hey, man, you got to get on the hotel. Like, they are not giving heat. And it turns out that the guy at the desk had no idea what he was talking about. Because when IHG and the management of the hotel both got in touch with me the next day, they were like, yeah, he should have never told you that and should have sent maintenance up to your room right away because we have both heat and air conditioning this time of year in the hotel. And we've had a lot of issues because they're having both units on at the same time, there's extra air in the lines, and all they need to do is come and drain the air from your room in the vent. And so, yeah, it could have all been avoided had he just said, here's my maintenance guy. But when I asked for the maintenance guy, he's like, well, there's no heat in the building. So I'm like, all right. So yeah, it was, yeah. I generally don't like to, in my old age, I've gotten to the point where I try not to air my grievances on Twitter unless I'm really, really angry. And I wrote that tweet about 15 times before I actually settled on what I wanted to say that wasn't going to get me in trouble. And I didn't want to embarrass the Binghamton club in the process. So, it had the smart ass tone to it, which I was happy about. And eventually I got my heat the next day. Well, fast forward to the following day, it gets cold again at night and my heat's not working again. And so they send the maintenance guy up again. They had to drain the system. And either way, I got my heat finally.
No, but Greg, that's legitimate. No, that's a legitimate 100% beef. And I thought the way you handled it was professional because, I mean, I see people all the time with airlines. They just go on these long 5-thread things, which for no reason other than just let out frustration. But I thought the way you handled this, but just coming back.
I've as I said in my old age, I've toned it down a little bit. But as someone who manages social media for a brand, and I've been on the other end of people's complaints before, and most of the time it's just people airing stupidity as opposed to actual legitimate feedback or things like that. And so I've been on the receiving end of plenty of that over the years to where I'm like, okay, I get it. Not everything's going to be perfect. But again, that was one of those where if I can bring an issue to light, I'm absolutely going to do it because you're a giant hotel in downtown Binghamton and you probably need to have heat. But yeah, no, being on the other side of those aren't always the funnest tweets to get. And depending on the validity of it is the level of smartassness from the SeaWolves social media accounts back to the people. But look, we take feedback and complaints seriously when they're legitimate. But when you have a fan that is just so outlandish with what they ask for, then it's like, okay, well, we're going to. Sometimes you need to put somebody in their place. We're not afraid to do that.
Yeah, no, it's well needed. And I totally, especially with, let's just say today, the minor league report was why is not Cody Clemens on this team? But anyway, that's another story for another day. And
we get 1,000 of those.
Yeah, we get 1,000 of those.
It's that is the one thing that I just think gets lost on baseball fans is, everybody thinks they know how to manage a roster. And when a big league team goes through struggles like the Tigers have over the last couple of years, I'm not saying that all the feedback wasn't warranted, but sometimes people just don't know what they're talking about. And, prime example, look, I love Dylan Dingler. Dylan Dingler is going to play in the big leagues, and he's probably going to be pretty good when he gets there, but he still has some work to do. He had a 3 RBI game the other night in Binghamton. And, the first thing is the minute we tweet out the game update, fan from Michigan pops in. It's like, well, he's getting closer. He should be in Detroit before you know it this season. And I'm like, no, off the brakes. He's developing. He's going to be really, really good. But it's just this anytime. And we dealt with it with Torkelson. We dealt with it with Green. I mean, I can think back to Kristen Stewart. Every time he hit a home run, Tigers Twitter would explode. Why is this guy not in Detroit? It's because, he had a home run. And then the next 10 at bats, he struck out. Like nobody, people see what they want to see on social media, and everybody thinks that they are the general manager for a baseball team. And it's like, just pump the brakes, folks, because there a lot of decisions go into these decisions, and a lot of people are a part of these decisions. And you don't want the worst thing you could do is rush a guy to the big leagues and have them fall flat on their face. And I can think of a guy that happened to in Detroit. It was Buck Farmer. Came up from West Michigan, 2 starts in Erie, and right up to the big leagues. And it took that kid a few years to get right. Now, he bounced back quite nicely and had a couple good years in the Tiger pen. But there's a risk when you rush guys up there. And, can the Tigers be contenders this season? Sure they could. If things start falling into place and they get healthy and they have, a guy like Riley Green comes back and he can contribute up there, and Mize gets back healthy and Manning gets back. Yeah, they can make a run, but they're still in the development rebuild stage. And, I think that just because a guy like Torkelson gets up to the big leagues doesn't mean it's done. And there's still work to be done in the minor leagues of getting more of this talent up there. And, it's a very show me mentality right now in Detroit. And it's going to take some time. But, you would have thought the world was going to end because the Tigers lost 6 straight games. And it's like, that's going to happen in a baseball season. Baseball season is 162 games. You're going to have bad spells during the season. And it's just a matter of how you can dig yourself out of that and hopefully perform. But they're just going through a tough time up there right now. I mean, they've got a lot of the right pieces in place. It just hasn't come together. It will. But it's the same thing with the minor leagues. Why are we going to try to constantly rush guys up when there's no need? And if you don't think that guy is going to be the deciding factor of putting you over the top to win a championship this year, then you don't bring him to the big leagues.
Yeah, and it works at every level too, where it's always like, okay, you want to bring him up. Who do you send down? Who send and we haven't really gone through the system, but Winsel Perez is having kind of a Parker Meadows breakout at the beginning of the year. He's a guy who probably would be justified getting the move up to Erie. But who do you make room for? Do you get rid of Lipsius? No. Do you Workman? Luis Carpio is a nice veteran, but you're not going to they signed him. They're not just going to cut him to make room for Winsel Perez. So you got to figure out how it works.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And yeah, again, you look at a guy like Carpio, you need minor league veterans to be a success. If you have a team with young prospects, you absolutely have to have a veteran or two that is going to be able to stabilize the ship. Someone who's been around the block for a while, and especially from the Latin American side of things, where if you have a veteran who's a Latin American ball player who can be a good clubhouse guy, that's a big key when you have other young Latin players coming up. And if you can have that nice stabilizing voice in a guy like Carpio, that's a guy you want on your AA roster because he's going to give you good at-bats. He plays well in the field, but he's also a good clubhouse guy. And that's a big part of it. But, a guy that you had brought up earlier, and why am I missing on his name? The kid that pitched for West Michigan today and struck out 7. Oh, my gosh.
Flores.
Yeah. Again, could he pitch in AA right now? Probably. But where do you put him? You're not going to displace Olson. He's not ready to go to Toledo. Hill's not ready to go to Toledo. You need Solbach still because he's a veteran in your rotation. Ladwig can go to the bullpen. But again, you Bergner, you're not going to give up on him right now, especially after what he did the other night. So you want to see these guys moving up, but where do you put them? Because the rosters, I can tell you right now, there are roster moves coming because of the big leagues shrinking their roster. So there's even fewer spots now in AA and AAA once all those moves are made. So it really is a situation where sometimes some guys are going to have to stay put for a little longer than you might want. I was, again, a little surprised Parker Meadows got called up when he did, just for that factor alone. And at the time, I think he was hitting .230 at the time of his promotion. But they felt strongly about it, and it was the right time after being an A-ball for a couple of years. At some point you got to see what you got in a guy. But I don't know with some of these other, the arms in West Michigan, do you really need them up here right now? I don't know if you do. And, maybe come July and August, if they continue to dominate, then yeah, we probably will see them. But yeah, there's that is a great point that gets lost on so many people is, yeah, we want to promote. Well, promoting to the big leagues, that's fine, but you're still paying other guys to be up there. And in AAA, you're paying for guys who are minor league veteran free agents that you have to have in your organization that you can call up if you need to in the big leagues. And so it's just a matter of no spots. And, if a spot opens up and a guy can seize that opportunity, then absolutely promote him. But as of right now, I mean, you got a guy like Bubba Derby pitching out of the Erie pen. He probably shouldn't be in AA right now. AJ Ladwig, he can go pitch in Toledo right now. He probably shouldn't be in AA. Yaya Shentooth. Yeah, he's had a couple of clunkers this season, but for the most part, could that guy go pitch in AAA? Sure, he could right now and probably have success. Joe Navalon, guy who ended the season in Toledo last year, didn't have great numbers in Toledo at the end of the year, but could he be in AAA? Absolutely. I just think it's a numbers issue right now for the Tigers.
Yeah, and a lot of these things take care of themselves through injuries, basically, unfortunately.
And injuries are going to happen. So that's what's going to change things is injuries. But as of right now, I mean, knock on wood, the health has been relatively good in the minor, at least at Erie. I know, Toledo just said Kreidler go down, and I didn't even see it. Have they said how long he's going to be out?
It's a displaced fracture in his hand, so I haven't looked, but that sounds like the worst possible outcome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to speed through we've obviously spent a lot of time talking about Erie because, why wouldn't we? We've got a great resource here. But if we want to speed through the rest of the system at all, or we can, just put it off all next week.
Let's do the speed round. And by the way, Greg, I think we're going to be in Erie for the 20th, 21st, and 22nd when the Fisher Cats come because I'm a fan of the J system. So I think, I don't know if that works for you, Chris, but.
Yeah, is Relvis Martinez in Double A right now?
I believe he.
I don't know. I have to look into that. But,
Also, Matt Manning bobblehead giveaway on the 20th.
Oh, all right. Well,
there we go. Oh.
Sounds good to me.
I think I know a guy who can get you one of those.
Say what?
I think I know a guy who can probably get you one of those.
Oh, there you go. Oh, maybe you can do a live stream.
Off the truck.
I was going to say, if you guys, when you do come to town, if we want to do something live at the ballpark, that'd be awesome to do.
All right.
Oh yeah, we'd love to. Thank you. That'd be great.
Awesome. That'd be excellent. So we did get
round consist of here. What are we shooting out at me?
Okay, so we did get Chris. Do you want to do the questions first, then go through speed round, or how do you want to do it?
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, we only got a couple. Let's see. So this Deadly Ninja Bees is asking, can the Tigers' fielding errors be fixed? And also, what happens with Brisky moving forward? If he doesn't go back down, what does the rotation look like? So that's those are more big league questions, but I don't know if we want to touch on those at all or.
I haven't watched enough Tiger baseball lately to talk about the fielding error. Is it been? I saw the end of the game the other night in Minnesota. That was not pretty.
It's just been kind of sloppy and a lot of mistakes, a lot of throws to the wrong base and missing the cutoff man and not keeping runners in check and letting them steal bases and things like that. That it does feel. It feels frustrating for fans, I'm sure, because the Tigers aren't hitting enough right now to afford any mistakes, and they're making a bunch of them. And it almost feels like they're just pressing in every way. To me, like Candelario made a throwing error today.
Is that a microcosm of a truncated spring training?
Yeah, I think it is.
You have a lot of new faces on there, guys who haven't played together consistently before. I think that probably has a lot to do with it.
I think, for example, a guy like Candelario who made that bobble error that could have done for a double, they could have potentially ended the inning with a double play. I think he's pressing a little bit too much. Candelario seems like some of the fielding errors just seem like more in between the ears because Candelario, based off his defensive metrics, is really good. So, but yeah, and we were saying just getting together, and there was one the other night with Harold Castro. He's not a third baseman. And as Chris said,
he didn't do well at that position here.
No. And those back in the Erie SeaWolves, I want to say it was an ugly logo. Let's face it, it was.
He's not that old.
Like Harold Castro, I thought he was in the system. He
got here when he was 21 years old. How old is he now?
29.
Something like that.
He was here for like 3 seasons, but no. The old logo, it was hideous.
I was trying to be polite about it, bro.
There's a reason we spent tens of thousands of dollars to rebrand this ball club, and it wasn't because fans were clamoring for. I think the best tweet I ever saw about the old logo, it was the guy who was Phil Koch's brain on Twitter.
Yeah.
He had some remark. It was something like it's a wolf that you would see on like some type of drug or something. And I'm just like, oh yeah, that's about right.
I always called it my brother. No, my brother or my father-in-law, or my brother's father-in-law lives in Erie, and he called it the Microsoft Paint logo. The Microsoft,
pretty much what it was. And at the time, and people were like, well, you got to keep orange in your logo. Well, at the time, so many vendors in the minor leagues that we could buy from, they didn't offer orange in their apparel lines. And that has since changed. There's a lot more colors you can add to stuff now. But yeah, a lot of times, I mean, we couldn't even get even things like batting practice, like the hoodies and stuff. Wilson didn't offer an orange hoodie or anything like that. So it was the orange went away because of the lack of being able to source orange garments. but yeah, there was nothing good about that logo. It was just bad, and it was so detailed that to get it stitched, it was like so many thousand stitches, and it was a mess. There was nothing good about it. I think I've purged. I might have one hoodie with that logo left. Everything else. If you go by the Erie City Mission and you see a bunch of people wearing old logoed SeaWolves things, that's I could take credit for that, because that was the boxes upon boxes of donations I dropped off of old. I've heard Crack Wolf. I've heard it all.
That's well, I completely forgot about that. I used to do reports every weekend, and I totally forgot about that logo. It's just gone from my memory. But looking at it again, it reminds me. It looks like something. It would have been like a tattoo on a bad guy in Beavis and Butthead.
Yes.
But
man, yeah, my brother's got the cap too. He's got the old cap too, and he wears it from time to time. And although I, Greg, I can't. Let me see if I find this. This is the one I was also kind of had many questions about. Let me see if I can find it real quick. This is the one. Before we move on, we did get a question about Colt Keith, so this pertains to when he's going to move up to Erie. But this one right here, yeah.
Oh, the dog in the bucket. Oh yeah, that was another beauty.
Oh,
doing.
Oh man,
is this Teen Wolf right here?
So that would have been worn for only 2 seasons, and that was 99 and 2000. So the original Crack Wolf. So the one that is right below that one. So yeah, the old one was really bad. The 95. So 99 2000 was the 2 years that Erie was affiliated with the Anaheim Angels. And so that was the logo during those 2 years, and it was just a god awful logo. Now we've actually brought back a Howling Wolf with our Howling Wolf set that we have. That's a hugely popular logo for us. It actually is at times outsells our Bandana Wolf. But yeah, some of those old logos, my goodness, were those bad.
All right, so we get a Colt Keith question. Chris, you want to get to that one?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Where do you all guys expect Colt Keith to be on prospect lists to end this year? Will he stay in West Michigan all season?
I think he's going to be doing Erie. I think we'll see him in Erie probably in July. That's just my guess.
Yeah, I mean, it goes a little bit to what we were talking about before, is where you're going to make room for the guys. But we generally see in the middle of the season, you see a kind of a raft of guys moving up to different levels, and some of it is like, I don't know, veterans have opt-outs after June 1st or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's
something that would come into play is, and I don't know what the contract situations are in with some of the guys in Toledo, but that absolutely could open up some spots. I'm trying to pull up Colt Keith's stats, and I of course can't. Ugh.
So he got off to a little bit of a slow start, but I think he's got like a 7-game hitting streak going right now. He's walking a fair amount. I think that the main thing that keeps him from being like a top 100 consideration at this point is a lack of in-game power. And he's not completely punchless. He's got plenty of raw power. It's just his approach that he likes to spray line drives. He doesn't put a ton of air under the ball. He hit a 425-foot home run to dead center field in Dayton last week. And
okay, so his numbers are actually better than I thought they would be. 286, 1 homer, 14 RBI, extra base hits, 6 doubles, 3 triples. Pretty good strikeout to walks right now too. I mean, if he keeps up with those numbers, yeah, we'll see him here.
Yeah, and he's looked pretty solid. He's another guy that they haven't played third, they haven't played second. I've said a couple times before, I feel like he may eventually end up in right field because he's got a big arm. And he's looked a little kind of stiff to me on the lower half, and his hands haven't been super smooth. But he's developing, and if he does that, if he can play solid defense, then he's a good offensive player. Like I said, it wouldn't shock me if he gets up to Erie and hits a couple home runs the opposite field off the wall there and left, because he's got that kind of power and sprays it all over the field. So. Yeah, I mean, the main thing holding him back, like I said, is he's not going to put up gaudy home run totals, at least for a couple of years. He may never. He might just be the way he hits. He might be a Michael Brantley hitter, which would be just fine.
I would say there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So let's go through real quick through Erie, and then we'll stop at we'll go to Toledo, then Erie, and then to West Michigan. And the big week for Toledo would be Cody Clemens, who continues to be on a tear. He had 2 home runs today in the law. They actually lost today. I was looking at because I thought that based off the amount of home runs and things going on, but of course, Omaha being that the Royals have a pretty it's not stacked as well as last year, but Cody Clemens had a good week. The Ryan Kreidler news obviously is devastating. But Chris, in terms of pitching, or Greg for that matter, I don't know if you guys have noticed, Toledo's starting staff has been kind of
I mean, they've dealt with a fair amount of, they were getting Michael Pineda ready. And Joey Wentz looks good in his outings, but he's just not pitch efficient this year. I don't think he's gone 5 yet. And who else do they have? I mean, they've been working Elvin Rodriguez back in. Trying to think who else is even down there starting. Chase Anderson.
Yeah. That's organizational.
Chase Anderson had 5 starts, 1 and 2, 471. Brisky had 2 starts. Faedo is a guy that put up a pretty good outing the other day.
Oh, I was just gonna say 17 swings and misses. Was that what it was? 17 swings and misses.
Yeah, it was a strange, Toledo looked like an unstoppable force the first 3 games of that series. I think at one point the Omaha announcer said Toledo had 10 home runs and Omaha had 9 hits in the series. And then, they got rained out a couple days, and then Omaha came back and beat them. But, it was a huge power explosion up there. And I don't know, the pitching, as Greg was talking about earlier, I think that once the rosters at the big league level shrink again, the pitching will get a little bit more stabilized in AAA, and guys will be fully stretched out now. I think we saw Brisky. Brisky was like 70 pitches in his first 2 minor league outings and 70 in the big leagues, and they had him go, 85 last night? I think we're going to see that with, more minor league pitchers soon. So hopefully that stabilizes the rotation a little bit.
4-start threshold in the minor leagues. That's when they really start to turn you loose. And that's what's been tough to kind of judge some of the starting pitchers in Erie this season. Even a guy like Bergner, once he started to near the end of his outing, he looked tired, and guys just aren't stretched out. But that's why it was kind of disappointing to not see him be able to continue the other day, only going 5, because I think he probably could have gone 6 or 7 very, very easily with how well he was throwing the ball. And same could be said when Garrett Hill had the 10 strikeout performance in his last start in Erie. He just looked so dominant. Nobody was going to hit him that night. But you have to be careful with those guys this time of year. And I'm actually stunned that we didn't get a tweet saying, "Well, I can't believe they took Bergner out and he had no hits through 5 innings," because I was fully expecting that to come, but we actually didn't get that tweet. So that was a good day at the office.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, hopefully people understand that the minor leagues, hey, it'd be nice to have a no hitter or whatever. But
the minor leagues for 20 years, they'll never get it.
Yeah, fair enough. One thing I did want to mention, you touched on a little bit earlier about them, about the pitchers throwing up in the zone more fastballs. I want to say all 10 of Garrett Hill's strikeouts were fastballs up in the zone that game. If not all of them, it was 9 of them. He was just throwing it right by guys.
I would believe that. If you would have told me it was 10 out of 10, I would have believed that. I mean, that's how effective the high fastball has been for him. This week in Binghamton, he just didn't have his best stuff, and he still gutted out 5 innings of 3-run ball. So I think he's going to be pretty good. And another guy, late 20s round pick, and he's got a good arm, and he's efficient, and he doesn't fall behind hitters. He always works from ahead, and it wouldn't shock me if he is in Toledo before you know it.
Sorry.
Back to you.
Chris was waiting for Chris. I thought we're going back and forth today. But
I always feel bad because I just feel like I step in too much, and I need to let Raj.
No, you're good. You're good, man. Oh, because I wasn't sure if you wanted to continue with Toledo before we move on to Erie's. Anything that stands out?
I had the stats.
In terms of Toledo,
Ryan Lavarnway had an amazing week, but he was 9 for 11. Daz Cameron hit his first home run of the year today. Zach Short had a big week.
I mean, when he first got to Double-A, it was pretty incredible to watch his first month, and then he just hasn't seemed to bounce back ever since that time.
Yeah, I don't know. It almost feels like he's one of these days they might end up designating him if they need to. He's gotten that, seems just to be that much of an afterthought. Although they brought him up to the majors the other day, but it's a bummer.
There's Zach Short had a big week too. You were talking about Zach Short in terms of his offensive numbers. They're starting to get a really good OPS up over 1,000 already, and the Tigers definitely need that especially with the fact that Short and Clemens can both play the outfield right now. And I hate to say this, but it's like kind of desperate times call for desperate measures right now, especially if Daz Cameron is not going to be a guy they're going to be on a regular basis. And Garrett Hill back in the lineup. He had a good weekend too out in LA. That's where he's from. His dad was on Saturday, and his dad's always interesting because on Twitter sometimes like, my son's better than you think, and he's absolutely right. But it was good to see his dad on. He was on with Johnny Kane on Saturday. So, but yeah, if they can, Tigers have to kind of see what they're going to have with Short and Clemens, because I know Clemens is playing third too, and we'll see what happens there. So let's move on.
With Garrett Hill, it's been the same thing his whole career. If he could stay healthy, he's going to produce for you. But I don't think there has been a season in his career where he has been able to go the whole way without getting hurt, and that's unfortunate because you're not going to find a better defensive center fielder than Garrett Hill, and unfortunately, you appreciate the fact that he's cleaned it up a little over the years, but he used to just be reckless disregard for his body in the outfield, and I think he finally realized I can't do that anymore. But again, it's the freakiest injuries from time to time with him too. It's just never been a full season where something bad doesn't happen with his health, and you just would like to see what he can actually do if he's healthy a whole year.
Yeah, there's a comment then from Walter who saw that same thing. It was just his dad was gleaming with pride because he was from the area. So, but as far as let's go to West Michigan real quick, because West Michigan is where a lot of the Chris, I'll let you start off with the what is it? I want to call these the next four horsemen. If you watch wrestling, Greg watches wrestling, so maybe the four horsemen, perhaps.
I have not watched wrestling in so long. I could not. I turned it on one night and I'm like, I know who the four horsemen are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah. So you got the.
Yeah. So. Yeah, absolutely.
Kevin Nash, one of them.
I love Ric Flair. Every time my wife gets mad at me, I'll act like Ric Flair in the house, and that just gets under her skin.
Just walk around like this.
I'll just go around doing this little strut where he's tapping his shoulders and drive my wife nuts.
Oh man, yeah, Chris, why don't you lead off with West Michigan before we head down to Lakeland, because Jackson Joe made an appearance today.
Yeah, so it's been a really rough stretch for West Michigan. I want to say they lost 9 of 11 games or something like that, including 6 or 7 in a row. And they aren't that bad. They've got some really interesting arms. But the offense has kind of just been a little inept lately. But yeah, we talked before the show that the 3 guys down there, Wilmer Flores, Ty Madden, Dylan Smith, they're all going to be up at Erie at some point this year, and barring injury, because they're guys.
I didn't realize Madden's numbers were as good as they are through 4 starts. That's pretty solid.
And it's interesting because he has not looked quite as dominant. Flores has looked the most dominant, and Smith has had a couple outings where he's just basically completely shut down the other teams. And Madden has had like a hiccup or 2 in every outing. But of the 3, he looks the best to me, like the most complete. Like you look at him, you go, okay, that's a starting pitcher. That there's nothing wrong with his mechanics. He's generally around the zone. He's another guy where they've had him alter his mechanics a little bit to throw up in the zone, fastballs up in the zone. And you could see him really kind of work on that because it's not something I think he was used to doing. And so he'll miss a lot up to either side, but then he'll dial it in, and I talked about it last week. He's got a slider that's almost like 2 different breaking balls. It acts in the low 80s. It's like a big, not big, but it's more downer action. In the mid 80s, it's got some really nice horizontal bite, and then he'll break out a low 70s curveball every now and then. Like, oh man, and we've seen a couple changeups from him too. So I don't know. A lot of what they have these guys doing in West Michigan is just developing as pitchers, and it's kind of independent of competition. But at some point, I do think they're going to, once they're fully ramped up, they're going to want to say, okay, you guys are doing well down here. You've done what you needed to. Let's see you take on some more advanced hitters. And if it's June, if it's July, I don't know. I expect to see all 3 of them up there. But they've been really fun to watch so far this year.
Yeah, Madden with, averaging a strikeout an inning, only 4 walks. That's encouraging when the walks are low for a guy that's got those kind of numbers in A-ball. That's pretty encouraging to see. And then Flores, obviously, I just had a stat line here. Yeah, 1 walk to 27 strikeouts. He's doing something right.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy. It's kind of the same story with all three of these dudes. They all have pretty nice fastballs. Madden's been up to 98. I think Flores has been up to 97, and Smith is up to 95 or so, just in terms of velocity. But they each have multiple breaking balls that they throw, and the changeup is kind of in its nascent stages. But yeah, it's.
You look at the opponent's batting average too. I take that stat pretty seriously at times, especially with the starting pitcher. And Flores 157 average against Madden 143, and Smith is at 170. So,
and we've seen, like, in Smith's last outing, he actually got touched up a little bit in one inning, and part of it was just some defense behind him, and part of it was it was another really cold game. It must have been 36 degrees, 37 degrees, something like that. And he just lost command of his fastball for an inning and had nothing. But it was one of those great developmental moments where you see this is a guy who might come out in the second inning because he just can't find the zone. He gets out of it and powers through the third and the fourth inning. Like, didn't have any issues there. So it was like, yeah, this is exactly what you want to see from a guy in the minor leagues. You want to see him learn to deal with that adversity. So I don't know. I've been really impressed with all three of them. And I drove, I think I told you before the show, I drove out to Grand Rapids yesterday to catch Flores because I don't think he's going to be there much longer. And, it always, like we said, it depends on who else can move. But these are guys that talent-wise are ready for AA, I think.
And going back to real quick, you brought up a really good point about how an inning can go just horribly awry. The other night in Binghamton, in Wolf's start, actually, and that was the game Erie shut out Binghamton 5-0. Jake Mangum leads off with a base hit, and then Francisco Alvarez doubles to the wall. They should have scored a run, but it was just a perfect relay from Meadows to Workman to Dingler, and he was retired to the plate. Wolf comes back after a great defensive play, strikes out the next two, and goes on to throw a 5 shutout. So, the defense cuts both ways. Sometimes you can lose it, and sometimes when it's good behind you, it really can help set the tone. I mean, when those two balls got put into play against Wolf the other night, I'm thinking, oh boy, this could be a really long night. And one good defensive play behind him, and then everything changed.
Yeah, I mean, I've made several times. I think I've made the comparison to Tyler Alexander a little bit with Wolf, kind of this cutter heavy lefty who just comes at guys and seems to get people out. And I feel like, Raj, we were in Erie and driving home, and Wolf was pitching in West Michigan last year, and he had like a no-hitter and a doubleheader into the 7th inning or something like that. It's like this very vivid memory, like we had just left the ballpark there. But
I remember because it was the reason why I thought it was weird because like we were that part of the Erie on the turnpike or on the road where it gets really, really dark after the ballpark. I don't know where we were. We were about to stop for gas or something, and you said you were talking about Wolf, and I just did the Pulp Fiction Wolf, and just kind of anyway.
Oh, you brought the Wolf?
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah,
that's all you had to say. Back to West Michigan, their offense has struggled. They lost Andrew Navigato the other day. He came up to Erie. He's been playing pretty well. But Winslow Perez, we touched on earlier, has had a really nice breakout. He's hitting for more power. He's been a solid offensive performer. Bryant Packard has really picked it up in the last week or two, which is nice to see because he's a guy that we had high hopes for 2-3 years ago, and then it's just battled injuries. But losing Meadows was big for them.
Taking up the IA. He was there all last season, correct?
Yeah,
he
Packard,
was.
Yeah, but he had some back injury. He had a back injury. Was that right, Chris?
Perez or Packard?
Perez.
Perez. Yeah, Perez was up there in high A, but he's another dude like Meadows. He made it up to West Michigan in 2018 when he was still 18. So it felt like he was there forever. But he was there for a full season in low A and then there for a full season in high A 2 years later. And he's back there in high A. And it feels like, this guy's, not a prospect anymore. And he's not really on lists, but he's 22 all year, which is totally appropriate for high A. And he's playing well. So, like I said, he's another guy who I think you could see in Erie. It's just a matter of, I don't know if he's a super high priority prospect for the organization anymore. So finding a hole for him.
Speaking of, you look at numbers year over year. I mean, definitely some encouraging signs out of him for sure. That's and he's a switch hitter, so that's another interesting dynamic with him specifically. You brought up Navigato, and boy, I feel for that kid. He comes in yesterday, They just get him in time for the game. He comes in late in the ball game, just hits one on the screws and a really nice play by like Binghamton's defense. I don't know how they became from a team that committed 6 errors in an inning the other night to this all-world defensive team the last couple of days. But poor Navigado sent one to deep right today, gets robbed. Yesterday, just screamer up the middle and gets robbed. So he's had a tough go of it his first couple of days up here. But again, not a flashy player, but he gets the job done. And really, that's what you're looking for out of a guy like that. He can pick it in the field, and he's going to give you quality at bats.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that's been more effective in pro ball than I expected, because he's another like 20th round draft pick or whatever. And he just, like you said, he just performs wherever he goes.
Yeah, that was the one that we got a couple of questions about.
You say that, and we've talked a lot about tonight about the 20 rounders that have been kind of bursting onto the scene for the Tigers. For the longest time, that wasn't the case in Detroit, where they would obviously hit on these big guys at the top of the draft, those can't miss uber prospects that are at the top. But then once you got to like rounds 5 through 15 or 10 to 20, there wasn't a whole lot coming out. And they missed on a lot of those rounds over the years. And it was always mind-blowing, because you play the Pirates every year in the minor leagues. We see Altoona a ton, and you're looking at their roster, and it has changed the last couple of years, but for the longest time, you're seeing this guy's 13th rounder, 18th rounder, 17th rounder, 21st rounder. And you're like, how are they continually hitting on these guys year after year after year to where I know they can't win for anything in Pittsburgh, but they at least have talent in the minor league that gave you a lot of hope. And now you're really starting to see that with Detroit. And that's been, I think, kind of the thing that's gone under the radar with the whole rebuild is some of these guys that they are hitting on that aren't those top picks. And, Skubal fell to the 9th round, was hurt, but they scooped him up, and he's going to be really good. You've got Brisky, you've got Garrett Hill. Again, you're starting to see them hit on more of these guys, and that's an encouraging sign for the farm system.
A guy like a guy I like too out of Erie's bullpen is Chavez Hernander, who was in the Arizona Fall League, and he's a 32nd round draft pick, and for how much. I mean, you think about the days, and Greg, I know you're a Cleveland guy, but I'm thinking about Rusty Meacham. Rusty Meacham was a 31 draft pick. Was the last time the Tigers, and this is like 87, 88. Yeah, Scott Aldred. I go back to some of these names that you probably have a baseball card like who, and those are the last time the Tigers had any type of late round, or for that matter, any type of draft round success. So I'm with you with that. And speaking of Erie, by the way, before I noticed today, I didn't notice that Paul Richan pitched today for Lakeland.
Inning today, yep.
Yeah. What happened to him last year, Greg? We saw his last start, and then poof.
Yeah, he was. They couldn't find anything wrong with him at the time, but he just wasn't right, and they shut him down. So I actually did not even know he pitched today. So that's an encouraging sign for sure. Again, another guy comes over in a trade. You don't quite know what you're going to get. His velo was down, I believe, at the beginning of last season. That was a major concern with him. But yeah, kind of that forgotten guy with what Alex Lang has done. Richard's in that deal, and he's just been that kind of forgotten guy. So you talk about another guy that might find his way up to Erie if he can get right. He'd be a guy.
Yeah, he's that guy. We may have
from his first start of last season. He just never looked right the entire time he was in Erie.
I think, I may have projected him to Erie before the season just because, that seems like where he would go. But yeah, he's obviously dealing with something. But it is nice to see him back on the mound, and clean inning today. I think 2 strikeouts. So. Down in Lakeland, so the big story down in Lakeland, they had a doubleheader today, but obviously it was Jackson Jobe making his 3rd professional outing, and he's another guy. They're very clearly ramping him up slowly. He had 1 inning his first outing, 2 his last one, and today he has 3 innings. First time he's given up some runs, but we're able to look at the pitch data thanks to the cameras installed down there in the Florida State League, and the fastball he basically touched 97.6 today. It's like, all right, that's a pretty good arm, and the slider has a 3,000 RPM spin rate. All the stuff we've heard about it. He just needs to learn how to pitch. You look at I think he got 4 swings and misses, and none of them were with a fastball, and that makes you slightly concerned. With it goes way back to what we first started talking about. I think, Greg, we're rock chucking. guys in the low minors, they have big arms, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing, and that's I think where Jackie Job is right now. And
everything with Job is it's going to take some time with him, and then they're clearly slow playing it, which I think is the good move. There's no reason to rush a high school kid to get up quickly. I mean, that's just there's no reason to hurry him along. Let him take his time. He's going to take his lumps. Everybody does their first year of pro ball, and it's again now without the benefit of true rookie ball levels, where a guy like that would have normally gone in the past. He would have played in Connecticut in the New York Penn League. Now it's really you're thrown into the fire going into low A, and some guys are going to flourish in that, and some guys are not. But yeah, I mean, his numbers don't look great, but again, it's such a small sample size with Job. I mean, he's thrown 6 innings all year, 2 earned runs, 7 strikeouts, 2 walks. It's time will tell, but I wouldn't. Of course, somebody's going to see on Twitter that he gave up a home run today, and the world's going to come crashing down. But
yeah, and they don't know that the dude he gave a home run to is like 6'5", 250 pounds. All he does is hit home runs and walks. It's a classic Yankees first baseman. He's got like a 30% walk rate with 6 or 7 home runs.
I was going to say, you sound like you're describing Aaron Judge there for a second.
Yeah, it's like everybody in their system. But yeah, I don't know. And the Lakeland team is just kind of fun because it's a bunch of young dudes for the most part. Like the oldest, I mean, Chris Myers was kind of the veteran there, and he got called up to West Michigan just this week. And you got like Justice Bigby, and I think Carlos Mendoza had a honeymoon. I thought he had 2 or 3 games in Erie last year, but maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe it was West Michigan.
Oh, you might be right.
Yeah, Mendoza.
But, it may not have actually been in Erie though, so who knows? Maybe on the road, but
no, you are correct.
It never fails. There's always a guy like that where we'll get him for a couple of games. They just need an emergency guy. So Carlos Mendoza, let's pull him up.
Yeah,
here.
But he's he's a fun guy because he's I don't know what's that.
5 at bats in Erie.
Yeah. 1 for 5. Also walks.
Like, he's just like a
hitter.
He's undersized and doesn't have much power, but he looks like he's just a giant pain to get out at the plate, and he steals bases and like he seems like a fun. I don't want to project anything more than an organizational guy right now, but he seems like a fun guy, kind of an infield version of Eliezer Alfonso. I don't know, like just somebody who's gonna be a pest at the plate and cause some issues. So, but yeah, it's Isaac Pacheco had kind of a rough week, but he wasn't like a bad week. He just had batted ball luck. Like he didn't strike out a ton. And Christian Santana got off to a hot start, and he's really struggling in the last 2-3 weeks, which again, we talk about, like, these are the things you want to see. You want to see guys struggle and get out of it. So we'll see what he does, but I don't know. It's fun. They have a handful
on there and see if they can work themselves through it. It's so tough to judge young guys like that at that level. So we had a question come in.
Yeah, there's a number of should-be minor league players playing for the Tigers.
So, I mean, we talk about that. People, they just, I don't know. We talk about that, and it's a source of angst for us because it's like, people want to, like, a veteran. Jeimer Candelario is struggling right now. He was literally their best player last year. People want to, get rid of him. It's like, it's been 3 weeks. It's, And there are guys, do you really want Cody Clemens? I mean, he's not the super high priority prospect. Do you want him coming up to Detroit and playing twice a week and getting like 5 or 6 at bats?
And that's been the biggest thing with a lot of these prospects. Or could they play in the big leagues right now? Can Cody Clemens go up to the big leagues tomorrow and not embarrass himself? Absolutely. But is that a benefit to him? Or is it more beneficial to his development and the long-term organizational development if he can get at bat after at bat after at bat in the minor leagues? And there's value to that. And again, it goes back to everybody wants to see everybody in the big leagues the minute they have a good week in the minor leagues. And it's like, but you're forgetting that prior to that good week, the guy had a horrible week and he struck out 25 times. And so, it's not for a lack of people in Detroit not knowing what's going on in the minor leagues, and that's across the board. And it's not just Tiger fans; it's baseball fans in general that just want to see that next best prospect all the time in the big leagues. And trust me when I say the amount of reports that these coaches have to do and the amount of analytics that they are reporting on a daily basis. Everybody from AJ Hinch to Al Avila and everybody in the baseball operations side knows exactly what's going on with every player in the minor leagues. And there is no doubt about that happening. If they don't know about it, then something's wrong, but they know. And so the amount of information that they are getting on a daily basis about all these guys lets them evaluate and make these decisions. I think a lot of times fans don't realize what goes into calling a guy up. And, I think the default is always, well, they're holding him back because of contractual things. And yeah, some organizations might be guilty of that, Tampa Bay. But at the end of the day, look, starting a guy's clock early, if you're a competitive team in the big leagues, is not a big deal. These owners have billions of dollars. It is a $20 billion industry. Starting a guy's clock is not going to set that organization back. It's a matter of club control and how long you can keep that guy in the first contract. I get that completely. But if Cody Clemens was ready to play every day in the big leagues right now, he'd be in the big leagues right now with the Tigers. And I think that's what gets lost on a lot of fans. They default to contract status and things like that. And sometimes that comes into play. Don't get me wrong, it does. But at the end of the day, the Tigers know what they've got in these guys. And if they don't know what they have, then that's why they're in the minor leagues trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't think we saw a little bit of that with the Tigers with Mize and Skubal and then Predis. They brought them all up, mysteriously, like right after they passed the Super 2 threshold. But we also saw that those dudes weren't exactly ready. They struggled. Sure. They all struggled. And the Tigers gladly brought Torkelson up at the beginning of this year, and they would have done the same with Riley Green because they felt like those guys are ready, and they're not going to play games with that. So, yeah,
no, they're not. Well, and it helps if you're Torkelson when you have Miguel Cabrera saying positive things about you. But yeah, I mean, they could have very easily, and that's a great example. They could very easily have sat Torkelson in Toledo to try and manipulate the clock on him. And that wasn't the best decision for the organization. So I truly do think that they are making the best decisions for the long-term success of the Tigers, as opposed to worrying about service time manipulation and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just, now you have a case where with the Tigers right now, it's just addressing the depth, and hopefully they'll be able to overcome these injuries. Because after the Pirates, you have Houston, Oakland, and so it's not going to be it's not going to get any easier from here for the Tigers, and hopefully they can continue to stay relatively or recover from injuries quicker. So we'll see what happens there.
Right now they just have to keep their heads above water because their schedule has not been kind to them early, and their schedule will get easier later in the season. But right now they're just in a really, it was really the worst possible time to have all these injuries happen, and they'll get through it. They're going to be fine. Hinch has got a good pulse on that team, and they're going to be just fine. There's never a reason to press the panic button after 1 month. And trust me, as a young kid who grew up a Florida Marlins fan of all things, the look on Roger's face on that one's like, what?
I just did. I hear the story behind this, but go ahead, continue. I'm sorry.
Well, so I mean, there's not much of a story. It was so I was a Cleveland Browns fan when I was a little kid, and I can remember vividly to this day. We were watching one of the AFC Championship games at my grandfather's house, and my grandparents actually live right next to us. Browns lose the AFC Championship game, and I was probably 3 years old, thinking, "Oh, my team's going to the Super Bowl." And I was so devastated that I threw my Cleveland Browns. This is how much of an ass I was as a little child, apparently. I threw my Browns hat in the trash can, ran home crying, and gave up on the Cleveland Browns at a young age. Now, 38 years later, 39 years, or however old I was at the time, it turned out to be a pretty good decision on my part. And I jumped on the Miami Dolphins. I just loved Dan Marino, and he was flinging the ball all over the place, Clayton and Duper. And then when they got a baseball team, my buddies were all Indians fans, and the Indians were terrible in the late 80s, early 90s until they really got good when they moved into Jacobs Field. And so I jumped on the Marlins. I was like, well, that's a equally as bad team, but at least they have cool colors. And I was a young kid at the time. And so, I was all Team Teal. And to this day, Jeff Conine is still my favorite player of all time. But I digress. The reason I bring that up was 2003. where they had a horrible start to the year. Jeff Torborg was the manager, and they spent all that money on the 03 squad with Pudge and gosh, I can't even think of all the guys they had on that team right now, but it was a really good team. And they had young guys coming up with Beckett and Brad Penny and AJ Burnett. All those guys were young studs, and they were medaling around 500 for the first 60 games of the year. And they showed Torborg the door and brought in Jack McKeon, and then they go on and win a World Series. And so, look, I'm not advocating any changes in Detroit. Let's get that clear right now, because I think they have a really good structure in place. But again, you can't judge a whole season on just 1 month of struggles, and that was my Marlins example. So yes, and there are 2 bobbleheads in my living room. One of them is Lance Parrish, and the other is Jeff Conine. So they're sitting on the shelf over there.
Well, I don't think the Braves were above 500 until August last year, and
there you go.
So that's why there's a long season.
Well, I mean, the question for you, Greg, in 1997, when the Marlins beat the Indians. That I'm sure that was a contention among your friends, right? Like,
oh yeah, and I, oh yes, I wore that Marlins jersey. I probably wore that thing way more than I should have without washing it to school during that World Series, and I just annoyed the heck out of my friends with that one.
Yeah, trust me, going to Cedar Point that summer as a Tigers fan, because I hated the Indians that much at that time in high school, and I said something about like, well, at least we didn't choke the Marlins, and I may have been I got chased a few times. I'm just saying, like, it's just, I was just, all I had to say was Jose Mesa, and people were just, anyway.
The most hated man in Cleveland, Jose Mesa.
Or I'll just say, like, you basically, with a bunch of cast-offs, you have one of the greatest teams ever assembled. You have, let's see here, you have Dennis Martinez, who is one of my favorite pitchers of all time. You have literally an offense that's just like Sandy Alomar, Jim Thome, Tony Fernandez, who is very underrated as a player, who I love him in Toronto. You have Vizquel, Williams, Marquise Rissa, Manny Ramirez, a young, David Justice. You still have Julio Franco, who everybody kind of remembers him as the old 80s Indians, but he's 38 on this team.
And he played for another 12 years.
Yeah. It is amazing the parallels of the good Indians teams from the mid-90s to the Tigers in the early 2010s, when it is a crime that the Tigers and the Indians don't have a world championship for all the talent that those two clubs had. Indians in the mid-90s, and then the Tigers, obviously in that 2010 to 2013 era. They didn't win at all, and they were so close. Both those teams so close, and that just shows you how hard it is to win a World Series. I mean, I look back at those Cleveland rosters the one day, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, in the '97 team, arguably a better team than the '95 team, with how good those guys were, and then they even got better as they kept continuing to add free agents all the way up until they finally lost Jim Thome, and I think that was 2001. But I mean, it is just incredible that those teams never were able to win a title. And it was always one, and for the Indians, it was like one freak thing every year that just would cost them, whether it was, against the Orioles in the division series or in the World Series when Jose Mesa blew it. And then Charles Nagy gives it up the middle to end that World Series. But yeah, it was amazing that those teams, they never won. And it makes you appreciate, I know the Yankees are probably the most hated team in baseball, but it makes you appreciate even more what they were able to do when they won 3 straight World Series, because that's so tough to do. And so yeah, it's that was I just wish that it was at a time, now that I'm in the Tiger organization, that both Cleveland and Detroit were good at the same time, because I think that would just be an incredible rivalry if both those teams were good, because it seems like when one's good, the other's not, and vice versa. There just hasn't been too many overlapping years where it's like, okay, these are 2 division contenders that are going to battle it out all season long, and we just haven't had that in a while.
It may have been 2007 the last time that they were really, which was like the Sheffield Fausto Carmona fight.
Yes, yeah.
Was Carmona?
Was that before or after they figured out Carmona was like 52 years old?
I was just gonna say his real name. Was his real name something? What was his real name?
Yeah, I think it was Roberto Hernandez.
Yeah.
It's just like you end up with a name like Fausto. Like what? I guess it was strange enough that people were like, "Oh, it's clearly his real name." Nobody would ever make a name like Fausto. But...
Oh man. Anyway, all right. Well, Greg, thanks so much for your time. I know that tomorrow you get to enjoy your rare day off, and before the
you got to drive to Buffalo.
Oh yeah, no,
Oh.
you were late to the conversation on that, but yeah, my wife had a family function down in North Carolina over the weekend, and she was supposed to fly back tonight, so it was going to be like, hey, we actually have a whole day off together. Yeah, no, her flight was canceled from Durham to Charlotte, and so she's not getting in until tomorrow now. So I have to get up in the morning on my day off, drive to Buffalo to pick up my wife, and they don't call me husband of the year for nothing, I guess.
Oh yeah, kudos, man. I mean, how far was Buffalo from you? From
About
Erie?
an hour and a half, so it's not bad.
Oh, okay, that's not bad.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean we're pretty fortunate in Erie with 3 major cities that are close by, and even Detroit's only 4 hours away for us. So it's a quick drive pretty much anywhere from Erie. But yeah, I mean Buffalo's airport's probably the closest for us.
Gotcha. All right, I did not know that. I thought that for some reason I thought Buffalo was a little further out, but the SeaWolves open up a 6-game series starting on Tuesday through Sunday. Of course, you can buy tickets. Go to the Erie SeaWolves or SeaWolves.com. That's it. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, go to the website, take advantage, and we'll be there in a couple weeks for Matt Manning night on the 20th and Spencer Trickelson, and then Sunday we're gonna stay the whole weekend there. I'm just gonna say it now. We're gonna be there in 2 weeks, and so because then I'm heading to Lakeland in June, the first week of June. I'm going to Lakeland for 4 days, so be part of our. If we had concert tour shirts, I mean, I know you're a pirate head, Greg, so maybe I should just create sort of like a minor league.
You know what? This season's killing me because our schedule does not play well with Jimmy Buffett's tour schedule this season. So if you know anybody who wants to call a game when we're up in Portland, Maine, I am all for it because he's in Bangor, Maine, the first night we're in Portland. So I am all about that. Maybe I'll just we'll fly you guys up. You just call the game.
Hey, I'd be fine with that. I'd love to see Sea Dogs game, so that'd be cool. It was just one of my first fitted hats was a Sea Dogs hat. That P with that's a really cool logo for me. I don't know why, but
it was better when it was teal. Now it's Red Sox red, and it's like nah.
Yeah, the teal. I was to say the teal was nice. You're absolutely right. Yeah, and now it's red and gray. It doesn't make a lot to me. I don't like it anymore. Greg, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate the time.
Really appreciate you guys having me on. Looking forward to seeing you guys in Erie in a few weeks, and we're always here for you guys. If you need anything, just let us know. But we really appreciate all you do, pumping up these minor leaguers, and it makes it fun when we have advocates like yourselves that are promoting these prospects on a regular basis. So kudos to you all, much appreciated, and keep up the good work. But we'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right, Greg. Thanks so much.
Hey, Greg, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
See ya. Let's see here. And we're ending. Okay.